Hello, wonderful Webit community from all around the world. 100,000 mark has been achieved in the number of attendees registered for this hybrid edition of Webit Global Impact Week, the world's biggest ever, with 2 hybrid locations in Sofia and Miami, and with 5 days full of truly fascinating and amazing participants, over 500 speakers, among them global leaders, innovators, but above all, some of the most beautiful minds, brave and visionary leaders. All of these in 12 hours program every day for 5 days in a week. Isn't it the Webit Global Impact Week? Welcome back to day number 3. There is no higher superpower than reproduction. And there is nothing more noble than protection, to protect lives, but above all, to protect the planet, which will protect our lives. Today is focused and dedicated on the planet guardians, those who guard and protect the future of the humankind and who are fantastic examples for all of us, for corporate and for us individuals, on how to lead a responsible lifestyle, regardless if it's business or private. The Planet Guardians Day at Webit Global Impact Week starts now. And our first panel discussion is how to lead a corporation towards achieving net zero. And we have the producer and political reporter from the Shade Room, Judith Nwandu. Hey, Judith, great to have you with us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at Webit Global Impact Week for this specific discussion about leading a corporation towards achieving net zero. I'd like to introduce some of our guests on the panel today. So we have Florence Verzelen, Executive Vice President of Industry, Marketing, and Sustainability at Dassault Systemes.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be with all of you today.
Yes, thank you so much. We have Harry Verhaar, VP of Global Public and Government Affairs at Signify.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Laura Storm, founder at Regenerators.
Hello, everyone. Looking forward to an interesting conversation.
Awesome. And I'm your moderator, Judith Nwandu, producer and political reporter at the Shade Room. Let's get started. So this is a question for all of you. What is your strategy to become 100% carbon neutral, and why is it important for other companies to follow suit?
So let me start, Judith, if you agree. Well, for us, the most important point of our strategy is not the arrival point, be 100% carbon neutral, but really the journey, how to get there. At Dassault Systemes, we are a scientific company, and the way we plan to reduce our emission year on year must be in line with the climate science and the Paris Agreement. And this is the reason why we have decided to adopt a methodology in line and approved by the Science Based Targets initiative, the gold standard in that field, in order to be sure to be aligned with the 1.5 degrees pathway. So we have done that, and we are proud to say that we are going to be doing that and achieve this SBTI by 2027. But at the same time, we have made sure that with this methodology, we also embark our supply chain with us, and push them to adopt the same methodology. And in complement to this science-based target, what we also do is we have set an ambition to engage innovative partnership with startups globally in order to leverage our sustainable innovation software to design, simulate, and enable new carbon removal technologies. Because between the SBTI target and the net zero, we need to find solutions that are going to remove carbon from the atmosphere. And to do that, we want to do it with startups, because we think that's the best way for a company like us, which has the purpose to enable sustainable innovation, to harmonize product, nature, and life, to do it with startups. And well, that's the way we want to do it and to embark startups with us on that journey.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Florence. Harry, Laura, do you guys also want to answer about your strategies to become carbon neutral?
You first, Harry.
Yeah, shall I go first? Okay. So Judith and everyone, so we believe that, and I think we know that a carbon neutral future is the only viable future that has livable circumstances. So we also believe it's important to lead the creation of the future that we need as a company. And that is why in Paris at COP21 in 2015, we also launched our commitment to become carbon neutral in 5 years' time. And that is what we accomplished last year, September. And there's more detail to it because there was a huge part of reductions and switch to renewable energy. But then, the main thing is that we went on this journey, and indeed there was a lot of learning in the journey, like Florence mentioned. But also we see that as a company, it is very simple. We cannot be successful in a society that fails, and so we would hope that all other companies also join on a similar journey. And we see climate change is a global threat. We've seen the impact of weather anomalies, particularly this year. But climate action is really, and has been said before, but is really a huge innovation opportunity because you bring to market those systems and solutions that are more resource efficient, so you waste less, that are more economical over their lifetime, but also that provide lots of social benefits for people. And we see that in our domain in lighting, you get more comfortable homes, a more productive workplace, safer cities. So I would say let's increase the speed. We also saw from Glasgow, we need to double the speed of action. So that we get there. It's the only way, it's the only viable future. So there's no other option.
Okay. And Laura?
So at Regenerators, we help organizations transition to the regenerative era. And net zero is the first stepping stone towards that. But we need organizations, companies, systems to move beyond sustainability. We have so much devastation, both in our inner and outer ecosystems. We are living through the 6th mass extinction. We have runaway climate change. But not only that, we are also more stressed, depressed, and burned out than we have ever been before in history. So we believe that we need to tackle this in an interconnected manner. We need a holistic approach. We need to avoid the tunnel vision towards only focusing on reducing carbon emission. That's incredibly important. But to unleash innovation and creativity and all of what goes with that, we need an interconnected, systemic, holistic, regenerative approach. So our vision is to move beyond the one-dimensional, silo-based approach of only talking about achieving net zero and sustainability in terms of aligning with Paris Agreement and the SDGs. It's of paramount importance, and you cannot be a successful company in the 21st century without those things. But we want to inspire organizations to, while they are at it, move beyond that and move even further while they are at it. So we have this holistic, interconnected approach to our problem solving and our strategy and development processes.
Okay, when did things start to shift for you, and how did the idea of regenerative leadership come into being for you, Laura?
So I have worked in the field of sustainability since I was a kid. It started very early on for me, and then I started to build organizations working in the field of the intersection between sustainability, climate change, and business since I was at the age of 25. So I've been at it for a very, very long time. But about 7 years ago, I got one of those wake-up calls that life sometimes give us. I had a major brain tumor, or that's not the right word. I had a brain trauma, which meant that I couldn't do anything for about 1.5 years. And in that kind of dark night of the soul, what I kept thinking was that we are missing the forest for the trees. We can't see clearly, us who work in the sustainability field. We are so stressed. We have very kind of, as I said before, we have a devastating tunnel vision, and we need to step back and think about interconnected systems in a holistic way. And we need to align our ways of being with the greatest intelligence there is on this planet, which is the logic of life, nature's intelligence in itself. So instead of the discussions around how to reduce targets and how to do all of those things, which is incredibly important, we need also to ensure that our organizations are moving forward in a healthy, regenerative way where they feel nourished, we need to apply a living systems viewpoint in our organizational development, in our strategy setting, etc. So it was very much one of those personal traumatic incidents that made me reflect differently, because it carved out the time needed to start thinking more creatively about the field that I have worked on for 2 decades. So that's what I do now. What can we learn from the intelligence of nature? What would organizations truly geared for the 21st century and with the challenges that we have in front of us, how would they look like? How can we design thriving, abundant organizations where both our inner ecosystems, our inner dimensions of that organization, which is our employees, our inner stakeholders, etc., they are thriving, but also organizations that, like living systems in nature, are creating impressive regenerative ripple effects far beyond what we normally think of is our kind of circles of influence as businesses.
What are some of the major things that you think people should learn from nature when thinking about how to achieve regeneration? What are some things that you would say that you've learned from nature?
There are some key principles in how living systems design themselves and how they are continuously and how they have for 3.8 billion years, how have they ensured that they continuously create conditions for more life to thrive? That's how life has evolved for billions of years. But since the 1950s, when we look at everything from CO2 consumption to transportation to urban population to population in general, it has just been one steep increase, and the same for stress, burnout, etc. So we have done a lot of destruction in a very short time when we look at how long life has been around. So we need to learn from the greatest intelligence that we are surrounded by. We need to open our windows and start to look at, okay, so how does living systems create conditions for life to thrive? They do that by focusing on partnerships and relationships. So life is a greater interconnected web of life. And we see in every living system, in every ecosystem, the higher the quality of the interconnected relationships, the higher the degree of inbuilt resilience and the ability of the living systems to quickly adapt to changes. That's what we need now more than ever in our organizations. But the truth is that most of our organizations are designed based on rigid, control-infused hierarchies, where there's an obsession with KPIs and rigid Q1, Q2 targets, one that is sapping the organization of vitality and flexibility and that ability to quickly adapt to changing environments. So that's one core principle. Another is that life is continuously changing. And we need to let go of, for example, I believe that Darwin has been heavily misused. So we often use Darwin as this referral to survival of the fittest. He never said that. He said that survival of the fittest, meaning it's not the most intelligent, it's not the most dominating, it's not the most loud species that survive. It's the species that are best able to collaborate, find their niche, and to again create these really strong relationships. So adapting to change quickly is another one of life's key assets. Diversity is a third one. A cyclical approach to life is a fourth principle. That ability to nourish a deep inner restorative winter, that time for integration, reflection, where we're really tapping into a deeper wisdom within our employees, within our organizations, and are really nurturing a greater wisdom within our organizations if we see them as living systems. It's that ability to understand that, okay, so Harvard Business Review recently came out with a study that 98% of executives are regularly burned out and feel they're under too much stress. What happens with our brain when we are under stress? It means that we go into high beta brainwave mode. That's a genius evolutionary brainwave mode that means that we're still around as a species. The challenge is in that mode, all our energy goes to that part of our brain. We get tunnel vision. We can only look at one challenge at hand. We are not able to think in interconnected systemic thinking. We are not able to be compassionate. We are not able to collaborate. And that's a huge challenge in our executive landscape and in our business landscape in general. Too many people are in the high beta all the time. We need people that come from a more regenerated, nourished place, and we have seen that as Harry just pointed out with COP26 in Glasgow. I witnessed firsthand how COP15 in Copenhagen completely collapsed because there was not a collaborative partnership. There was not these really strong interconnected relationships. And Christiana Figueres had a completely different approach. She created safe spaces. She focused on the interconnected relationship, and I think that was a major reason why she succeeded or creating space for another kind of result in Paris. I'm going to stop there because I want my fellow panelists to have the chance to speak as well.
Thank you for sharing that, though. That was like really insightful, especially for someone like myself who is just learning more and more every year about regeneration and carbon neutrality. So thank you for that. Harry, I would like to ask you, because you mentioned some of the goals that you and your company have for the next 5 years, and then even just coming off of what Laura's talking about, you know, an ecosystem that's been here for over 3.8 billion years. Right now, we're in a pandemic. And in a post-COVID world, will economic recovery need to be prioritized over the financial burdens of rapid energy transition? So what impact will the energy transition have on?
Yeah, happy to comment on that, Judith. And maybe adding also a little bit to Laura's remark, and then I think also one difference between the failure of COP15 in Copenhagen and the success of COP21 in Paris was that in the latter conference there was much more gender balance. You had Christiana Figueres, you had Laurence Tubiana. So it was much more focused on common interest instead of negotiation and what is in for me and what is in it for you. Yeah. It was much more collective. So, but then on economic recovery. So if you want to prevent the hopping from crisis to crisis, have an intermediate recovery, we need to look at sustained economic recovery. And that can only be successful if it's green and digital, and have it the goal of net zero in the back of our minds and in front of us when we act. So that is also something that is relevant for company survival. I can tell you a little story about that on our company. So we saw in the early days when the European Commission was thinking about how to translate the Kyoto Treaty into regulation, that we needed to work together. We needed to show how much does lighting matter. And in those days, lighting was 19% of global electricity, so almost 1/5. And we were the leader. We were the largest. So we could have said, like, hey, let's protect what we have. But at the end of 2006, we made a global call to phase out ink and nets and light bulbs. It's now sheer logic, but it was quite shocking in those days, world headline news. But essentially, we said, okay, we want to call for the phase out of our entire business. So bulbs and tubes. While LEDs were not yet around, but we could see them coming on the horizon. Well, today we are 84% LED. And the other legacy players, they were slower. So the biggest, let's say the global number 2 and 3, they are gone. They are split up or they're gone. So it's also a matter of company survival. So in that sense, it's important to realize that that any business should look at this recovery from what business do you want to be in the future? What is the technology that will create a business? Absolutely don't fall in love with the cash flow of your old technology, because then you're doomed. Because it's not the big who eat the small, but the fast who eat the slow. We've seen that in our sector. And I would dare say then anybody looking at vested interest, but if you look at vested interest too long, you'll be out of business and sitting on it, and nobody will want to have it. So it's really a matter of urgency, a matter of envisioning the future. And as soon as you're slower, or as soon as you slow down, then also let's say your company survival is at stake. So let's realize again this is the only way to go forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Harry. Florence, I want to talk to you about new technologies. What is the positive and negative influence of new technologies on environmental issues, on achieving net zero and SDGs?
Well, It's a very good question, and well, I really like the way you pose this question, Judith, because there are really two sides of the coin. Because in terms of CO2 emission from technology today, it's not easy to calculate because a lot of technologies are embedded within other industrial processes, but in average, the estimates range between 1.5% to 4% of global emission. And while it's close to the emission of the aviation today, and the problem is not so much the actual percentage, but the growth rate, because the use of technology is growing exponentially, and therefore the emission footprint from the sector. And this is the reason because why us at Dassault Systems, we have set this science-based target and this net zero ambition, because we absolutely want to be net zero and not to be part of this exponentiality of the emission. But one of the reasons of that exponential growth is also because in this footprint, there is the fact that a lot of industries are leveraging our technology to green themselves. And we call it the on-print of the technology, or the positive influence, as you just said, Judith. And this positive influence is massive. Actually, a recent study of Deloitte with our partner Gezi has showed that the deployment of the existing digital technologies would help accelerate the SDG progress by 22%. So achieve the goal of the SDGs by 1 quarter. And just with our own technology, the technology of Dassault Systems, the virtual twin, we have released a study in January this year together with Accenture that shows that using virtual twin in just 5 use cases in 5 industries: construction, high-tech, consumer goods, life science, and mobility, it could generate $1.2 trillion of economic value, but also save 7.5 gigaton of CO2 equivalent by 2030, which is the equivalent of 1 year of greenhouse gas emissions. So the savings can be huge. So to put it into perspective, there is a lot that can be saved thanks to technology. And of course, it's impossible to compare apples and oranges, but I'm convinced, and that's the reason why I'm here today, and that's the reason why I'm doing my job, basically, that the positive impact of some technology, and in particular, the technologies that enable sustainable innovation in industrial design, in manufacturing, in logistics, largely outweighs the negative impact from the use of goods sold. And I think it brings a lot in terms of positive effect. And I think that with all the commitment of the tech companies that are aiming to go net zero, well, we are going to bring a huge part of the solution when it comes to solve the climate challenge.
Okay. Now, would you be able to share some of the projects you're working on for developing smart cities and large transportation infrastructure?
Yes, definitely. And actually, smart city and transportation infrastructure are super interesting, because if you take a step back, infrastructure, they're representing 70% of CO2 emissions. So if we solve the infrastructure challenge, well, we solve a big chunk of the CO2 emission challenge. And in the study that we released with Accenture in January, we discussed the case of the city of Singapore. And what did we do with the city of Singapore? We basically used the virtual twin of the city. And why is it useful to do the virtual twin of the city? When you do the virtual twin of the city, you can do many things. You can decide together with your fellow citizen, how do you want your city to evolve? If you want to create new buildings in your city, you can discuss with your citizen, how are your next buildings going to look like? But you can also discuss with your citizen what kind of road infrastructures, what kind of transportation you are going to want in your city. And you can even simulate the flows, including the air flows, and therefore the pollution and the CO2 emission, in order to do a lot of simulation, thousands of simulation, and decide for the most sustainable option. And that's what we did for the city of Singapore. And we did that for Singapore. We also are doing that for Guangzhou. We are doing that for cities in India as well. And we are doing that for a lot of cities that have expansions issue. And it allows them to expand in the most sustainable way, finding the best places to put the next buildings. I mean, there are new areas and new buildings, but also finding the best transportation networks and also the ones that are going to be the most sustainable ones, and allowing their population to have the best transportation network, basically. And what is true for the transportation network and the sustainability of the city can also be done in the same way for the energy of a territory. And for example, we've done a very interesting project that we have called Model Scale. We did that with a major energy player. And what is Model Scale doing? We basically simulate the energy system of a territory in order to see how we can insert in this territory solar panels, wind turbines, but also heating networks, and also EV charger batteries, in order to optimize all the network of the territories and make it as sustainable as possible. And we did that in 2 cities in France, one close to Toulouse and another one close to Versailles. And it allows them to have the most sustainable energy network and heating system in this territory. And as Laura was mentioning at the beginning, it allows not only to optimize the system, but really to have a system approach, which is not only the hierarchical approach, but really the system, which is a better way of optimizing everything and solving basically the sustainability challenge. And I think it's a very, very interesting approach. So we are super interested in this project, and we are very committed at developing some other project of that kind. As I was saying at the beginning, 70% of the CO2 emission comes from the territory and the city. So if we can help solve this challenge, we help solve a big chunk of the issue of the CO2 emission.
Okay, and that's how you also discuss with some people when you discuss these plans, you discuss mapping and twinning technologies and using those in order to succeed. Sorry, would you like to touch on that briefly just once again?
Yes, definitely. When we do that, for example, in Singapore, what we have done is really to do the virtual twin of the city. Like you have the digital twin of each building and even each tree of the city of Singapore, and it's really multi-scale, multi-physics. You don't always have the same level of precision in the way we do the digital twin of the city. Depending on the project, you need a lot of precision or not the same level of precision. Singapore was really precise. In some other project in India, for example, we didn't have the same level of precision because it was really just the flows on the road that we wanted to improve in order to make just the transportation flows more sustainable. So it really depends. Or when I was talking about model scale and the energy flows, we really enter into a lot of details about the energy flows and the energy needed for the factories, for the buildings, for the housing. Not so much details about the materials that were in the housing, because that was not the purpose of this simulation. So the level of details of the simulation depend on the purpose of the simulation, but depending on the purpose, you can have a very, very detailed simulation.
Okay, thank you for that. So Harry, I have a question for you. Should emissions reductions ultimately be driven by producers and suppliers or the commercial and domestic consumers of energy?
Well, I think as much as we need in any initiative push and pull, we need both the demand and the supply side. So to work together to accomplish this whole transition. And in a way, there are 4 building blocks as the way that I look at it. So you need the technology, which is where we come in. You need the policies, so but also the policymakers come in, and policies actually you need those for the speed and the depth of the transition that is needed. Then you need financing, so business models. I'll say something about that. But then also, then communication and consumers and customers. And for them also, we need to make this whole transition more tangible. So instead of talking only about global challenges, we should also then translate those benefits and things that people understand. So it could be the health resulting from better air quality in the city. It could be more comfort and well-being. I think actually that health aspects should be spoken about much more than just about the megatons, so that people see and also then express through their voting and buying behavior that they're behind this. So that actually also this slow down effect. I heard from the COP in Glasgow that actually there was still a lot of fossil fuel and the intensive industry lobby had to slow things down. So if we are more clear to customers where they come in, and actually that the logic fits in a nutshell, then they will actually through their voting and buying behavior start rewarding the forward-looking politicians and the leading companies that drive this. And I just mentioned that 15 years ago was 19% of electricity, but last year it was 12. And we see in 2030 it will be down to 8. So these things are possible. And there's an interesting link to the relevance of infrastructure that was described by Florence. That is indeed. So then a lot of technologies, they depend also on the rate of infrastructure renovation. So how fast are buildings being renovated? In our case, also what is around the building and the street lighting, because that's only just a little bit more than 1% per year. So if you want new technology to be adopted faster, you also need to design policies, but also frameworks to accelerate this transition so that people are more quickly, let's say, living in homes that are in the end that are passive homes, that companies don't waste energy on the companies and that they work in, but also cities. So on average, lighting makes up 40 to 50% of a city's energy bill. And when they transition to more connected LED lighting, the lighting also, because it's then digital, becomes the backbone of a smart city. So the light points can also be used indeed to smell, to sense the air quality, but also to triangulate sound and detect if a sound was a traffic accident and alert the ambulance. So there are lots of things that you can do there. And if you then look at the numbers, I mentioned that we are 84% LED lighting, but still 2/3 of installed lighting is conventional. And if that would switch, it's equivalent to 277 billion euro per year that can be saved, but also the equivalent of the annual electricity consumption of 500 million households. So there's still massive progress possible, and it's really important to take an infrastructure angle. So therefore we are pleased that the renovation wave is in the European Green Deal, that infrastructure is even in the headline half of the American Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and also in the Build Back Better program. So let's hope and also let's advocate that those bills and those initiatives will not be watered down in the months and in the years ahead, because they actually describe what is needed. For the first time, you could say in our modern history, the building blocks are there. I think the tools are there, the technologies are there. We can help customers and other consumers and understand that this is in their own interest, not only the bigger climate interest, but also their daily interest. So that's the way that we look at how lighting can contribute.
Okay, thank you. So this is a question for all of you. Laura, Harry, Florence, whoever wants to go first. How can cooperation in education and science, research and innovation, and new technologies act as a driver for positive change?
Well, I think cooperation is an essential driver for positive change. And actually, if we want positive change, we absolutely more and more collaboration between people of all different backgrounds. And it all begins with education, I guess. And for me, there is first a real education challenge, because you're talking about cooperation in education, and in particular skills and sustainability. Because today sustainability is still considered a specialty, like a master degree. And for me, it should be a mainstream topic, like it should be included in all education and not just be in some dedicated job, but really skills for all jobs. And for example, us at Dassault Systemes, we are developing certification programs for everybody in eco-design or product management for sustainability, because we think it's important for all engineering jobs. And well, in research, we think it's at Dassault Systems, we also think it's a feature of research. Like sustainability imperative, it's gonna force really a lot of domains to work together. Chemistry, material science, system of system, engineering for repurposing, recycling, new manufacturing, real world evidence for operation and usage. And it's new interdisciplinary disciplines that are going to come together to solve the challenge of sustainability. So in order to do that, I'm trying together with my friends from research and with a lot of partnership with university. We have more than 3,000 partnerships at Dassault Systems to create this link between design university, research university, and from different areas in order to basically create the projects of tomorrow that are going to help solve the challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe adding a few words on education. Yeah, of course, it's really crucial that there are sufficient people educated on the technical aspects, but also you could say more the people science in education. I think that quite often the reason why we are moving so slow has to do not only with the rational parts, so calculating the benefits in carbon and monetary terms, but also with the psychology of change, because people tend to see more of what they lose. In our case, incandescent light bulbs and what you have. But it's much more difficult for people to see what do they gain. You don't know, you can't visualize that easily what's there in the future. And it's just, I think, for us in OECD countries, had just a few generations ago, when any change was positive, because the people had very little, and that's how they developed. And we see that also in developing countries. Yeah, any change is seen as positive because tomorrow can only be better. But then, once people grow older, or maybe when they become more prosperous, then they become more conservative, a little bit generalizing. So there's some, I think also interesting research to be done on the psychology of change and how do you make people move and adopt their different behaviors. But then a second point where education is important is that when we look at the size of the challenge, so we actually need to more than double renovation rates of infrastructure, have it close to 3% per year. But then I sometimes imagine if tomorrow everybody says, yes, we'll do it. Yeah, then we don't have sufficient workforce. And so we also need not only to model how many buildings and so forth need to be renovated and changed and other energy transition, but also how many people do we need to educate in the different STEM disciplines at medium and let's say low, medium and high skill level, so more hands-on and maybe more, let's say the PhD-like, because there's also this qualitative challenge. Do we have sufficient people in the education system with the right curricula, the curricula for the challenges and the technology of tomorrow to actually do the job?
And to build on what Florence and Harry has said, I completely concur with what has already been said. And in my opinion, the universities and education system they are not fit for addressing the challenges of the 21st century. Even some of the major Ivy League universities, they don't yet understand the importance, as Florence mentioned, of integrating sustainability and the ability of systems thinking and thinking into interconnected systems. It has to be interwoven into every discipline. Plus, we need the ability of collaborating and think of how can we include an interdisciplinary approach, because we need to move away from silo thinking. We need that holistic view as an approach, as I said in the beginning. But it's also that ability to lead in complexity and lead in a constantly changing environment and landscape. A major CEO study carried out recently said that 80% of the CEOs believe that leading in complexity is the greatest challenge of our time. Yet less than 40% felt equipped to actually do that because they have not been taught how to do that. And what happens from a psychological point of view if we again want to understand how human behave? When we feel pressured and challenged, we are inclined to continue doing what we have always done. We want to stay within our comfort zone when we feel scared and challenged. And we need to do the exact opposite. We need to start to think as the world is a complex, interconnected system. And what is then the right approach for me as an organization? And how can I stop doing what I've always done? Because as Einstein has been quoted for many times, the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again, yet expect a different result. But what I see is that many executives all around the world talk about creativity and innovation as the most important asset and capacity in a leader, yet they don't really dare go to where true innovation and creativity really happens. Because we have not been taught how to do that and how to access that deeper inner wisdom that we have if we dare apply another kind of mindset and another way of being. So that's something that I would argue for, a new kind of mindset and a new way of daring to be courageous as a leader in the 21st century.
Okay. And this is a question for all of you. Thank you for everything that you've shared so far. I'll start with Laura. What is your vision for the coming decades in general? And what are your predictions for the future development and achieving the SDGs and green economy on a global scale?
My vision, which is not a prediction, but the vision that I work towards and advocate for and do my best to contribute to is how do we create regenerative societies? Because we need a regenerative approach now more than ever, a regenerative approach that is leaving ecosystems both inner and outer better than we found them. That is, in my opinion, that is the only way for us if we want to stick around as a species. And we need to dare talk about it like that, because that's also what science is saying. So I would encourage the courage to start to talk about these issues in a way where we apply a more heart, where we dare to talk about human beings that care about this planet we live on and see ourselves as custodians and stewards of this planet. And what does that then mean in terms of my legacy? Am I contributing through my time and through my actions? Am I investing in the route for our survival in a way where we can live on a thriving planet and live thriving lives? Or am I doing the opposite with the investment that I make, my money and my time? So my vision is a regenerative future where we are creating conditions conducive for life in our cities, in our organizations, in our education systems, in every circles and in every sphere. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there.
Okay, all right. And Harry?
Also my vision, but also my hope is that progress is not linear. But actually that we can accelerate while transitions occur. But for that, we need action. And we've seen also in Copenhagen again, so a lot of commitments and pledges, as some people even call it a pledge fest or green rushing. That was also a new word that I heard. But we need to back that up with real action. And it can be real simple. So I would also say for companies and also for cities and ministries to adopt 100% renewable energy programs. To swap your own car fleet, as we're doing with our company car fleet, for electric. So lots of initiatives are possible, and they will also provide learning to fine-tune policies and to fine-tune business models to further accelerate towards the level that is needed. And I would say that also, and as Laura mentioned, how do we spend our time? And I've got this 10-20-70 rule on how we spend our time. I would say that let's spend 10% of our time on inspiration, as to sharing, like we're doing today with the audience. Then what is this better future? How can we get there? Why is it better than the past? 20% of our time we should spend on aspiration. So how much should we do by when and who should do that? But then 70% of our time we should spend on perspiration. So rolling up our sleeves and getting the job done. Because we have also found that it takes a lot of time to execute all those bright ideas and commitments. So we really need to spend 70% of our time. So a bit less time on agreeing what to do and a bit more time on doing what was agreed. And so that's a little bit, maybe in a nutshell, my vision and my hope for the coming years ahead.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Harry. And Florence, take it away.
Thank you, Judith. Well, I'm an optimistic and well, I'm convinced that we can make it, but we need to make sustainability a business priority. And it won't be easy, but we have to do it. And I remember Klaus Schwab said a few months ago that Klaus Schwab is the founder of the World Economic Forum, that the changes right now are so profound that from the perspective of human history, there has never been a time for greater promise or potential peril. And we are in the decade to deliver for climate change. And coming back from COP26 in Glasgow, well, there is one thing that really I realized in Glasgow, and that was said by John Kerry many times, that we will only succeed if the private sector is on board. And I could feel, and I guess, Ari, you could feel it too in Glasgow, this energy from the private sector that really, really wanted to take its fair share of the workload. And well, I guess we all want to do it. Now let's do it. And let's basically create this sustainable world, because we owe that to our children.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much again, Florence, Harry, and Laura, for joining us for this conversation. This was a great chat about all of your ideas and all of the ways in you're actually achieving net zero in your sustainability roadmaps. And I really appreciate you guys all for joining. Thank you, Webit listeners, for joining. You can find us and share your thoughts and questions on social media with #Webit. And of course, in order to enhance it and make them as successful for everyone on board, feel free to take on the opportunity for networking provided by the TDS platform during the days of Webit Global Impact Week. Thanks for joining and signing off.